Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We are now in poem 263, A Single Screw of Flash. The opening line reads, a single screw of flash is all that pins the soul, the second line. And we'll just say this out loud right away. This is one of the more difficult poems of Emily Dickinson to try to figure out exactly what it is that she is doing. It obviously is an amazing single line, no doubt about that. And there are so many different ways to interpret this set of lines that I'm really happy that we've called our series Chats with Emily. So we're not going to make any kind of dogmatic interpretation or exegesis of this poem for sure. Our assumptions, you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've actually read the previous 262 poems in the Johnson edition. We just finished with 262, the lonesome for they know not what. Now, if you've done that, and you've done the previous readings of the previous 262 poems, you know that when we meet a poem like this poem is a little bit more abstract, a little bit more difficult to try and figure out exactly what's going on. I think that what's going on here is a very old problem for Emily, one we've already seen. That dialectic, and I use the Platonic language, that dialectic of the spirit and the soul, the body as it's thrown in there. So exactly what's going on between, for example, the physical, she'll call it the flesh, and the soul of the spirit. Exactly what is that dance? Of course, we know that Descartes played around with it. We know that Plato played around with it. So I think Emily's picking it up as well. Now, I think there is possibly a biblical reference here. Several scholars have pointed this out, that in Exodus 34, starting at verse 29, there's an interesting story that I think Emily might be playing with here. And it came to pass, I'm reading now from the King James Version, which is of course the one she would know. And it came to pass when Emily came down from Mount Sinai with the two tables of testimony in Moses' hand, when he came down from the mount, that Moses wist not that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. And when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come nigh him. And Moses called unto them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned unto him, and Moses talked with them. And afterward all the children of Israel came nigh, and he gave them in commandment all that the Lord had spoken with him in Mount Sinai. Now, verse 33. Until Moses had done speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But when Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. And he came out and spake unto the children of Israel that which he was commanded. And the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, and Moses put the veil upon his face again until he went in to speak with him. Now, it's possible that some of what's happening in this poem is in reference to this. It isn't clear, but maybe this is as well a poem about doubt and belief. We'll again, have fun trying to interpret it. A single screw of flesh is all that pens the soul, that stands for deity to mine. Upon my side the veil, once witnessed of the gauze, its name is put away, as far from mine as if no plight had printed yesterday in tender solemn alphabet. My eyes just turned to see when it was smuggled by my sight into eternity. More hands to hold, these are but two, one more new-mailed nerve, just granted for the peril's sake, some striding giant love. So greater than the gods can show, they slink before the clay, that not for all their heaven can boast, will let its keepsake go. Now, again, it's a remarkable poem in terms of what it is she's trying to do. Of course, the language is challenging, and here are all the S hard sibilant sounds. We've seen this, obviously. A simple screw of flash. By the way, when this poem was first printed, it was actually misprinted with screen instead of screw of flash. Of course, now we'll work with the actual language of Emily. A single screw of flash. Screw will take us to poem 675. When we get there, we'll come back to her other use of that word. Flesh is used in 18 different poems, but this is her first use of it. Notice she'll say, a single screw of flesh is all that pins the soul. The technology language, the language of technology in this poem with screw and others will be something we'll pay attention to as well. In other words, the soul is somehow contained within this flesh. How does that happen? Obviously, the most ancient of questions. Notice she'll say about it that stands for deity i.e. God, obviously, to mine, upon my side, the veil. Now, is she referencing the Exodus 34 passage that we just read? Possibly. Once witnessed of the gauze, and gauze here will take us back to poem 105, its name is put away. Now, what is she saying? Well, once an individual dies, that is to say wrapped in gauze, its name is put away, an obituary, as far from mine as if no plight had printed yesterday. In other words, death and the experience of death obviously is something that is lived through now through an obituary in tender, solemn alphabet. Maybe she's talking about the obituary. By the way, when we get to poem 441, this is my letter to the world that never wrote to me, she'll say, judge tenderly of me. Her use of this word tender, I think, is powerful. In tender, solemn alphabet, my eyes just turned to see. Is she speaking about someone that she saw who had passed, who was dead? When it was smuggled by my sight into eternity. Is she talking about the soul of one she's loved? We're familiar with this idea already in her poetry. It's possible. Of course, she could be talking about publishing with this use of first the word screw and then now to print it in alphabet. It's possible. More hands to hold. That is to say, there's always more people to enjoy. These are but two. That is to say, two hands, or maybe two people who have gone. One more new mailed nerve. What an amazing line. New male nerve. Just granted for the peril's sake, some striding giant. And then she'll use the word love, taking us back to poem 178. It is remarkable what she's suggesting. In other words, when we're close to death, we're maybe more willing to believe, but when we're further from death, we're less willing to believe. She finishes with, so greater than the gods can show. They slink before the clay. It's an amazing use of that word slink. When we get to 1165 and 1326 poems, we'll play around with this slink. Obviously, clay is the flesh, right? That not for all their heaven can boast, will let its keepsake go. She'll use this word keepsake in poem 465, I willed my keepsakes, and in poem 499, in everlasting keepsake. And that's significant as well. What is her argument here? Is she suggesting that the gods are in some way jealous to not want to let humans go? Because obviously the difference between the gods and humans are the gods are immortal. I think one argument in 2a is that near-death experiences can push us towards faith, while the ones we survive obviously will allow us to continue to doubt. At 2b, the S sibilant sounds are, I think, powerful here, and the key word slink is quite remarkable. This obviously at 3a takes us back to our study of Walt Whitman and Song of Myself passage. You'll remember 48. I have said that the soul is not more than the body, and I've said that the body is not more than the soul, and nothing not God is greater to one than oneself is. And obviously the Exodus 34 passage is part of 3a as well. Study poems 1165 and 1326 as well to see her use of that word slink. I think that's the key word of this poem. Finally at 3b, how do you read this poem? And is this a poem about doubt? Is that how you read this poem? It's amazing when we reach these poems how incredible they can be read on so many levels.